Hey everybody, welcome to the Unqualified Film Bros podcast. We are talking about another Oscar nominee as we count down to the ceremony in just a few weeks. This one is the seventh horror movie ever to be nominated for Best Picture. Bonus points to either of the two of you if you can name the other six. We are talking about The Substance. Gentlemen, what'd you think?
Um, as
Sorry,
the
I'm
res
thinking the best pictures.
Yeah, no, I was you said six other horror films got it
Yeah. Can you name
nomination?
the only one that's ever won?
Silence of the Lambs.
Correct.
Yeah, oh well yeah, because yeah, I would disagree with
Not
the
really a horror film though.
It's
I would
not.
disagree with I saw some of the I saw the six horror movies, but yeah, two of them are definitely thrillers. Not horror
Is The
movies.
Shining another one?
No.
No.
I thought it was.
What is it? I don't think it was nominated for Best Picture. I don't think it was nominated for anything but the
Jack
Razzies, I'm
Nicholson.
pretty sure.
Oh.
The first Razzies.
Hmm.
Nominated Shelley Duvall for Worst Actress in the film for
That's
Worst Movie.
crazy.
I know, right?
I actually didn't.
Horrendous.
That's wild. For worst act? Wow. Okay.
Every horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture. Sixth Sense,
All right, that's I guess horror.
Black
Enough.
Swan,
That's psychological drama. That was the other one.
The Substance,
Hmm.
which we are going to talk about, but we do want to go through this list
That's
first.
100% horror.
Yes.
Um, Silence of the Lambs, psychological thriller.
Yeah, psychological.
Get Out,
That's a horror.
Yeah.
The Exorcist,
Yeah.
Horror. Yeah, that one definitely deserved.
and Jaws.
Yeah, that's a horror. I mean, it's a light horror because it's not as gory as some of them, but it's
It's
still a
hard
horror
to.
movie.
It
It's
is
hard
the
to.
man versus nature movie of all time.
It is. It's what made people afraid to swim in the beach.
The
Um,
sequel still has the greatest tagline of any movie I've ever heard of. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
oh, yeah.
Genius marketing. Love it. All right, The Substance.
So I'm a big body horror fan. Always have been since I watched any David Cronenberg. I think I watched Videodrome first. They sell it in a 1,000 movies you have to read before you die book. Um, and yeah, I've been a lover of that. It's grotesque, but it also the coolest thing about it for me is it visualizes all of your internal fears, and that is a very wild idea for me because we have a lot of psychological, ideas in movies, but to bring that to the forefront and to have your body almost be distorted by your own internal psychological issues is something else. And in that vein, I love it. It's completely Cronenberg. It's got its own spin. It's got its own way of telling the story. Certainly, I love the different viewpoints from Sue being like, very cool, and the music's always bopping, at least in the beginning. Everything's going well. The cinematography is very bright, and then you go to Elizabeth, and it's after she takes a substance, it's very almost. I mean, it's distorted, but it's also kind of psychotic. Like she's slowly losing her mind. We talked about The Shining. I mean, she's essentially slowly losing her mind by becoming less of herself.
Yeah. I mean, she's surrounded by it when she's walking through the shining hallways in the
Yeah,
video.
and
Like
certainly The
it's
Shining influenced some of
yeah.
those
It
scenes.
evokes the Overlook Hotel for sure.
Yeah. But it's like it's the hallways lined with all of the pictures of her slightly younger self. Like
Yeah,
she's just like surrounded by all of this and then with the executives yelling at her. I mean, it's not subtle. Like the executive's name is Harvey. I think we all know
yeah.
where that's
Also, they
coming
make
from.
sure to
Yeah.
basically shoot Dennis Quaid as slob, basically the worst presentation for a
The
guy. as
the shrimp
possible.
scene at the beginning of the
Yeah, the shrimp
movie,
scene is
Yeah.
it
disgusting.
might be like I might be exaggerating here, and I'm definitely exaggerating, but that's the hardest scene to watch in the entire movie.
And I think that's what makes it a great scene
It's
is
not, but
because
it's so gross.
you see all this like grotesque stuff happening with bodies, but somehow a guy eating shrimp that awful. I guess they're shrimp prawns. I don't know. Maybe they're the same thing. Not really sure.
It's just
They look like
sloppy.
prawns. But yeah.
But yeah, it's like it's greedy, it's grotesque. Gluttony is the sin that I thought of, you know. It's like in Seven, they kind of portray gluttony as the same way.
True.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a sort of thing where it's like he looks terrible, and he's like, yeah, you're just not looking so hot at 50. You know, your boobs are starting to sag a little bit. This is like the sleaziest, most unattractive man possible.
And this is after our first image of him is taking a piss and then walking
Yeah.
out, not washing his hands,
And
and
the
and
camera
immediately
work
goes to eat.
the
Like in
camera work is fantastic. I love that it does these really weird close-ups on his like lips and things like that. Because it kind of, you know, the foil is Sue's lips. They're so perfect, you know, they're so beautiful. And then you got this guy running the show that's like the most
I mean,
disturbed, disgusting human being you could possibly imagine.
beyond all of the insert shots of Harvey's face as he's eating the shrimp, just the sheer number of insert shots in this movie.
But
It's
everyone, I mean, it's
it's
always like
absurd.
it's comparing a lot of like you've got a lot of those for Elizabeth and Sue comparing like, you know, oh, this person's old. And then when she finally starts to get deformed, it's like, you know, what has happened to you versus, oh, the perfect image. And then you got Dennis Quaid sitting there just the same greasy, disgusting slob he's always been. But it doesn't matter for him.
Yeah, this movie is not easy to watch.
For you.
Um, fair. No, I think I can speak in a generality with that one. It is a lot to take in.
I would give that caveat for any body horse. That's fair enough. But I just meant there are some people that love this stuff. Same people like some people love grindhouse, some people love gore. I also one of the big things that I love with body horror is it's almost always practical effects. If you're doing with CGI, you should
It
probably
doesn't work.
take your life, because body horror should always be
I think
practical.
I read 30,000 gallons of fake blood used for this movie, most of which was probably in the theater scene at the end.
Yeah, the ending
Yeah, 29,000 of those gallons was used in the last scene.
that definitely felt like a bit of different movies, but somewhat of an homage to Carrie. I know George, you probably have not seen that
I've
movie,
seen the
but
scene, I know.
you know the ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah, I
don't know.
mean,
It wasn't that bad until, I mean, it was really the end
The
that,
yeah,
last
no,
20
it's
minutes was
like,
a lot.
the majority
it's
of the movie, and it's a 2 hour and what, 20-minute movie or something.
About, yeah.
Yeah, like it's pretty standard. I don't know. It's pretty fun. It's fine.
Yeah, it's not really, with the exception of the first bathroom scene, like where Elizabeth takes the substance and Sue is created. With the exception of that scene and like the last 20 minutes, it's not even really horror so much as like horror satire.
but yeah, it is a satire for sure.
Yeah. And
Um,
obviously the commentary is there throughout about, you know, women aging in the entertainment business and women aging in general.
yeah, and you can take a lot of stuff. I mean, plastic surgery is probably a big one you can take from that. It's like constantly altering yourself to make you more appealable to others. And you know, you get that phone call every time. It's like what you've done cannot be reversed. And it's kind of like the tragic thing is people do it. And I've read stories from people when they're younger. It's like I did all this stuff and then they kept doing it when they get older, and your body just does not recover the same. And you get distorted features. Sometimes you're trying to do too much to try to reverse things that just naturally age. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like raging against nature, and what do you get for that? But necessitated, I suppose, by the kind of overarching themes of your worth is your beauty, not necessarily like they mentioned she won an Oscar. Um, I thought that was probably like a nod to Jane Fonda. She was a big workout star, but she was also a very accomplished actress. She won two Oscars. Um, but she was always looked at as, a very beautiful person. And even though she was very talented, a lot of her worth was probably associated to her looks for the studios and those guys, the executives that are disgustingly eating shrimp. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are just a ton of themes that I think I can draw from, and that's probably my favorite part about body horror is it's psychological to an extent. It's just on the outside. And to sort of, follow up your point about it not being bad until the end, that's pretty typical for a lot of body horror because the idea is like, the ultimate, most grotesque thing is your ultimate, psychological breakdown. And that typically happens near the end of the film. Sometimes it's, the climax can be anywhere, but um, it builds up to that. It is a thriller to an extent, not just there for horror thrills. It's not a jump scare thing. It's very much a psychological thing. Um, but yeah, I am so happy to see this kind of, art be celebrated, get Oscar nominations because David Cronenberg only got nominations for the things that were not body horror. I mean, this is a pretty revolutionary thing, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't think that this would ever happen.
of those movies that we listed earlier, maybe The Exorcist is the only one that would really qualify as body horror. And even then, it's not like
No, no, it's
grotesque
not
like
body
this.
horror.
Not, yeah, you're right. So none of them qualifies
None of
as
them.
body
No, no,
horror.
none of them. I
So
mean,
that's
body
that.
horror is not a wide range of horror movies. There are way more like slashers and, supernatural thrillers and things like that. It's a very unique genre that I think I told Max, Japan was the only one that really picked up on it, aside from Cronenberg. And maybe you get some themes of that in like John Carpenter and The Thing and stuff like that. But it's a really hard thing to watch for a lot of people. It was back in the day. And that's what made it so, I guess, challenging is like you're not allowed to just think about it. You're forced to face it visually. Um, but yeah, I don't think any of those would be considered horror. The Exorcist is just, it's a fantastic movie, don't get me wrong, but it is a supernatural horror movie. And yeah, I guess some ideas is she looks really perverse and distorted as a human being because she's inhabited by a demon. But it's the same idea as like, the perversion of flesh. Um, but the origination is in your mind, you know. She is the Matrix, as they say in this movie. Everything comes from her. And if she didn't have the distorted perception of herself, she would have never taken it.
And it's interesting that you talk about the distorted perception of herself because the scene that might win Demi Moore her Oscar this year is the mirror scene where she is herself. She hasn't become this distorted, disfigured creature that she is later in the movie. Even before she and Sue face each other and Sue kills her. But in the mirror scene where she's getting ready for her date, that obviously never happens. Just the constant push for perfection and the look isn't right. The look is never right. It's never perfect. Without even using the substance or without even considering like Sue and trying to be younger and more perfect. It's just her as she is, never good enough. And I think that speaks really, really loudly about the themes of this movie.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
that's, but I mean, I think the difference there is that she is going out on a date with the one person in the whole movie who found her beautiful at her advanced and old age, her washed up age of what, 50 in the
Yeah.
movie. And yet she still has this crippling anxiety and worry that she's still not going to be perfect for this guy that even though he has by all intents and purposes indicated that he is interested in her for herself at this
yeah, I
point.
mean, I think
Like,
it's deeper than that. I think it's not just like she doesn't think she's good enough, like to herself, not to anybody else. She
yeah.
needs that, respect from even the sloppy executives. It's like you see Sue and she's smiling. She enjoys the adoration and the people telling her, "Oh, she's beautiful," even though they're absolute slobs, disgusting people, morally, like physically, everything. But she still is craving that because so long that's been her definition of worth. And I mean, the other thing is like the substance, 7 days off, 7 days on. But it's that countdown, I think that also emphasizes the theme. It's like, yeah, it's 7 days, but the more and more you get closer to that, the more and more you're in danger, you start falling apart essentially.
Yeah.
And it's that theme of, time just ticking on. And it's like if you're so obsessed with your beauty and that's your only worth, then you're essentially going to just be wasting all the days.
So, question for you guys: would you take it?
No.
Hell, are you kidding me?
Oh,
No! Oh my God, I'm too late to get to my other body. All of a sudden, my finger's rotting. No, absolutely not. Did you see Demi Moore or sorry, Elizabeth was like, she looked like an old crone, like 200 years old, and she's like, I need something to stop this. She's like, she didn't want to get any worse. That's the worst nightmare I could possibly think of.
Agreed. Yeah.
Also, why I think Body Horror is so strong. It really touches something in your mind, which is like it disturbs you. And for
I
some
was just
people,
the second we saw that old finger, I was so disturbed. I can't even talk about it. It's just you're right. It touched
I
somewhere in
think
my
that's
brain that
that's the point. And it's also like the abrupt transformation. When you grow older over time, eventually your finger may look like that. But the abrupt transformation somehow
and the
like jogs
contrast with the rest of her hand and with
our
the rest of her
mind.
body.
Exactly. It's like
And then
it's not
trying to straighten the
necessarily
knee out later in the movie.
all right. Well, the knee is a little much, but the idea I think is really cool. It's like
That's a little
the
much for me,
abrupt
but everything else is
change
fine.
and everything like over 7 days, all of a sudden, oh, I screwed up here. And it's kind of like, oh, you screwed up over life, you missed a year, all of a sudden, you got older. Obviously more extreme, but that's kind of the nature of body horror.
So we talked about this film as an Oscar nominee. Obviously, only one of the seven, well, six, and pending this seventh, has won Best Picture. Compared with the other Best Picture nominees that we've talked about, compared with the other Best Picture nominees that you've seen, what do you think the chances are that this film can make some history in a couple weeks?
Zero, zero.
it's
The
not
only thing that
winning.
had a chance was The Exorcist. I'd have to look at what that went up against. But when The Exorcist came out, I mean, that was culturally crazy. I didn't live through it, but you can read plenty of people's documentation of the whole vibe. I mean, that was a scary ass movie. But yeah, it's pretty tough for horror to win. I mean, nominations are like the greatest thing possible. Get Out maybe had the best chance to win, also, but The Substance is against way too tough competition.
It's not winning. There's no way.
Aside from Amelia Pass, that has been unofficially unnominated.
I know.
Yeah. That's a tough situation that we'll talk about when we do our Oscar predictions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't see this one beating some of the other nominees. It's interesting in the category of Best Actress with Demi Moore nominated against some
That
stiff
is a cool
competition,
one. I have to feel like part of that is the Jamie Lee Curtis effect and some of those others, which is like these people have been in the business for a long time and you just sort of want to give them their flowers. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis probably is less of a technically accomplished actress than Demi Moore because
I
most of what she's known for is
I love Jamie Lee
different
Curtis.
things.
I still disagree with her Oscar win, and I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were going down
Um,
the list for everything everywhere, which I get. It's
but
a cool call, but maybe they went overboard.
the last 2 years, the Best Actress winner has been the lead in a really out there sort of sci-fi movie with Emma Stone for Poor Things and Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere
Yeah,
All at Once.
she definitely has a chance to win. That one I will say. Um, and if she
I would
wins,
consider it a
it's not the
two-horse
same
race
as
at this
Jamie Lee
point.
Curtis. Like, I just want to say her performance here is very, very good. It's just very rare for performances to get even nominated. Um, so I feel like she has, even if the performance is good, I feel like it definitely has some undercurrent of like giving her flowers that she got nominated and got this far. Because like, I mean, there are a million great performances. A lot of them get ignored. Get Out, I think, also touched, a more like cultural, political divide. It's not just a horror movie. I feel like you really need to extend beyond just horror to get into the Oscars because historically that's just been the case. You have to do something really incredible to uh, to get a nomination. And if you win, that would be amazing, but there are very few that do. That being said, I honestly think because of the situation, she has a chance to win, and I would not be upset with that. It's a fantastic performance.
Yeah, it would be a very well-earned Academy Award for her.
Yeah, and the Oscars are always like it's a political thing at the end of the day. They literally made it to sell movies, but it's always nice for all the people that get them. It's like even if yeah, it's sort of rigged or it's not the most accurate thing. For everyone that gets an Oscar, anyone that gets any award, it's still nice. It's a recognition from your peers. So it would be nice for her to get something, especially because I think this is a very personal role to her. Um, I mean, she was extremely beautiful actress, and lots of people cast her for that. And she's definitely had her experiences with plastic surgery. She's talked about that before. Um, and yeah, I love the performance. It's fantastic, and you can tell it comes from a place of personal experience. Margaret Qualley's good too, but there is definitely a difference in bravado, I should say,
Yeah, there's a lot of
or gravitas.
subtextual weight behind Demi Moore's performance that we don't get from Margaret Qualley, and I love Margaret Qualley in this movie. But
Yeah, everyone's great. It's just her performances like stand out.
yeah, it truly it's worthy of its nomination. I mean, think of
Yeah.
all of the movies that we've seen from the last year. This easily stands in the top five for Best Actress consideration that we've talked about.
No, definitely. Um, and honestly, the Oscars, you could nominate a million people every year. There are lots of good performances. Some of them are not good, which is probably when I critique it, but there are a million good ones that you could put in there. And even if I don't think they're good, like they're not, a lot of them are not bad. It's just you could pick a lot better performances. I'm
Yeah.
trying to be positive, I'm trying to not be as negative anymore.
New Year's resolution holding strong.
Yeah, well, I started a little late, but you know what? Things are hard enough. I'm going to be a positive person.
Just exclusively on the pod.
Yeah, just on the pod. I'm going to be the
not in
most
real life.
negative person off screen. I'm going to yell at grandmas for moving too slow. Tell them
I
to
would
take
expect
this.
nothing less. So, what do you think of the world created here? Because obviously it's akin to modern day. You know, there's cell phones and modern technology and all that. But obviously this is a kind of surreal science fiction world with the idea of the substance being a thing.
I
What do you guys
disagree with that.
make of the suspension of disbelief and what kind of world we're put into here?
I disagree with. I don't think it's a science fiction world. I think it's like
Yeah.
uh,
It's
it's an
absolutely science
offshoot of
fiction.
what it's like it's what we're living in. Like this is a very real,
The very existence of the substance in the film
It,
indicates science fiction.
it's like saying Limitless
like
is a science fiction world. The idea
I
is
would
that
call
there's a
Limitless
science
a
fiction.
science fiction world.
It's a science fiction film. It doesn't make the world science fiction. I mean, everything aside from that is kind of realistic. That's
like
the
the
idea.
substance to stand in for any number of real world drugs that are about out there right now and procedures that alter appearance and make people look younger and
Yeah.
radically more attractive. Like
Also, it doesn't change the world necessarily. It changes the person, but it doesn't interact with the world really.
But we still
No
see
one really
like
sees anything unless
the guy
yeah.
at the guy at the diner who's the older version, implied to be the older version of that nurse who gave her the substance. Like
Yes. Well, it
this
is.
obviously exists in this world. She's patient 503, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it's permeated the landscape of this world even to a limited extent.
Sure, but I don't
it's
really get the
science
point.
fiction.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a reason there's like magical realism for like Harry Potter. Right? The real world exists still, even if there's a magical world separate. But I mean, that this is even separate from that. The world is essentially just a reflection of our world. It's maybe more hyper centralized and it's more extreme, hyperbolic, but
Okay, that's a fair
man,
assessment. I do love
uh,
the visual presentation of the world. I think the cinematography is outstanding. The production design is wonderful.
yeah, I
Like
mean the only thing
this
that I
film looks fantastic.
the only thing I would say is it definitely has clear 80s influences, but I would assume that's kind of like a nod to Demi Moore, considering that was when she first came onto the scene.
And
Uh,
I mean, it's all focused on an aerobic show.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a current thing, but the point is kind of the same, I guess, because those aerobic shows were all about like how good you looked back in the 80s. And now we get the idea that this is someone that, was very popular in the maybe the 80s, but is not anymore.
Yeah, like
But
we see
it seems,
the time pass at the beginning of the movie with the
yeah,
star
it
on the
seems
Walk
good
of
to
Fame.
continue that. Um, I don't know. But yeah, to answer your question, the world itself is pretty much the same. I mean, I don't think those ideas of like your worth being your looks are as different from the 80s
No,
to
it's
today or
very
any other days.
thematically similar, yeah. Any more thoughts on the substance?
It's really cool. Um, watch it yourself. I mean, I love these movies. You can draw a lot of things from them. Even if they're not intended, I find them very cerebrally challenging, and you get out of it a lot if you engage with that. That being said, you got to be able to deal with random gore and
Yeah.
flesh.
This movie was unsettling for me. Um,
Good. That's what it should be.
I did not feel good after watching it. Um, but
You didn't feel like eating a giant chicken or
oh
turkey.
God, stop. Um, but still, I gave it its plaudits on Letterboxd. It's a 4-star movie for me. Um, it's absolutely a very well made film. If you can stand the body horror, you'll enjoy it.
I agree.
Max, any last thoughts?
No.
Okay. All right, and that's it for us. We'll see you next week. Have a good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.